Alrighty, so we are going to install this snorkel on Sam's 4runner, since I did not make a video on mine because it was too anxiety provoking.
But now that you're a pro, it should be pretty easy.
Yep. So you want to get the whole fender taped off with just a single layer of blue tape, just so you don't scratch your paint up too much. And then in the engine bay, you've got 3 bolts underneath, 2 1/2" and 1 12 mil, I think, or one of them's a 13 maybe. All these clips that go all the way around. That one's on the far back side. And then if your truck's like his, you're gonna have a little wiring plug that goes on the top and on the bottom. It helps if you disconnect this hose going to the intake, so you can have a little bit more wiggle room, and then some pliers to disconnect that hose, and it'll all come right out. Once it's out, this little bung right here is going to get removed, and then we'll have to take a Dremel to drill down these little tabs right here, and I'll show that in a minute. So this little intake just kind of fits over this, and if you take a flathead and pry up at the base of it and just push and pull, it will come right off. Now, in order to get the hose for this snorkel to fit onto the air box, you have to Dremel all these tabs and just sand them down with a little sanding drum until it's flush, and you can test fit it as you go. Alrighty, so once you have everything trimmed up, this should fit over like a glove, and if it doesn't fit over it, then you need to make sure you Dremeled all the tabs, and then we can pull this off one-handed. You have the top tab right there, little side one right there, little focus. Then on the other side, you're gonna have one on the side close to the body and one right there. And they don't have to be pretty, obviously, because they're going to be covered up, and then once you get the hose on and everything, then you'll clamp it, but I suggest waiting until everything's in position before you start putting clamps on. Pretty simple. And then you'll want to very carefully and slowly cut out the stencil so that you don't rip it or tear it. The instructions on the stencil are really straightforward. Everything lines up with where it's supposed to, the fenders. So once you have everything tacked up and where you think it needs to go, I wouldn't like hard tape anything yet, but you'll want to get the fender liner out. There's 4 10 mil bolts and then some push clips that are a pain in the butt to get out. But before you actually start taping anything down for good, you want to take the fender liner out and take the intake, and you'll want to set it to kind of emulate how it's going to go in, and make sure that this part lines up underneath just about where your hole is. And as long as it does, then tape the whole template down well, and then start tapping and cutting. We'll get to that in a minute. So you can see it's sort of set in, kind of lined up. Obviously, nothing's been drilled or anything, but once the liner's dropped, we can look at it from right here and come up, and that looks pretty good. We come around the side, you can see it right here. So we'll spend a couple minutes just making sure that it is actually in line, and get to cutting. With the fender liner, there's these little tabs, like retaining clips for the 10 mil bolts, and they're pretty annoying. We usually just kind of pull them down and it kind of breaks them, but I'm not running any on mine, and my fender liner's in very tight, so we should be okay. And one other thing to mention is that when you are trying to like eyeball the fitment between the intake neck and the fender, it's not going to be perfect, but you need to take into consideration how close it is to the fender and how much room you have on this exposed part that's going to go to that filter, because you've got about, you know, 1.5 inches or so of play in this where that hose will actually clamp on and fit and fill the void. So it's not going to be perfect when you dry fit it, but it should be really close. And one last thing you can do to check it is put the snorkel together, slide that neck over it, and then just float it over, and make sure that with the template and with the hole for the intake, it matches up. And obviously, again, there's a lot of room for play. You're cutting out the hole in the body much bigger than the actual neck needs to be so you can fit the hose through. But because of that, there's room for a little bit of alignment and tweaking if you were to be a millimeter or so off. But we've got our line on the top, and we've got our line over here, and everything is about as good as you can get. So fender liner's dropped, everything's ready to go. So now we'll start cutting out this hole, and then we're going to use a center punch to punch out these, and then a small drill bit to start, and then we'll drill them out to about 11/16, 5/8, 11/16, so the studs will fit. So once you finish cutting it, which you'll be done any minute, we're gonna file down the hole and make sure that it's clean so you can fit everything through easily. So while he's cutting, I'll go over a little overview. So this is what the underneath of my fender liner looks like. I didn't put this one bolt back in, but everything's pretty sturdy, very sturdy. I mean, you can't pull it out. The Snorkel comes with this little foam pad that you can see right here, and you'll see us when we put it on in a minute. I was kind of hesitant to put it on because I didn't really know what it would do, but after doing it, I immediately regretted it because it stuck out kind of far and looked really ugly. But as it's kind of sat in the sun, it's shrunk up a little bit, and it helps a lot. It's not loud, it doesn't squeak at all, and I guess it kind of protects the paint surrounding the area. I did not drill and rivet, but I think that we're going to with sands. But it's, I mean, you know, it's in there tight. You can kind of shake the whole truck with it. So after cutting everything, you can see we're on that line perfectly. On the top and on the bottom, everything matches up. So now we get to start punching holes and drilling out. So now you can get your studs in and use a generous amount of some blue thread locker. You can get them pretty tight by hand, but you'll want to hit them with a key and get them torqued down all the way, because you don't really want anything coming loose later on. But that's with all the studs in. Just trying to finish up cleaning the hole up a little bit in this bottom corner, but everything's all perfect. Got all of our holes drilled out. We might have to go a little bit bigger on some of them, but we'll put it on and see how the alignment fits. So on this, see kind of how it matches up to mine. So there's hole right down there. That goes right here. And it's pretty self-explanatory. They all just kind of snake right up into it. So we did the same issue on mine when we installed mine. And that is that these top two holes, whether it was our fault or the template being off just a little bit, but they don't line up perfectly. So we drilled ours out to 5/8. And they fit perfect on the front, but on the rear, the holes just need to go up to about 11/16 or 3/4. And as long as you use the supplied body washers, you can go up to about 1 inch or so, and it's not a big deal. So don't be afraid of going bigger, especially on these back too. And just make sure that your center punch is even when you whack it, and maybe even go out just a little bit more, or just be prepared to drill these back too just a little bit bigger. But it's test fitted, everything matches, and the big hole matches, and that's really all that matters at this point. And just like I thought, we had to kick this big hole up to about 3/4 of an inch, maybe closer to 7/8, and this bottom one to 3/4, just to make up for the little bit that we were off. But every stud fits in good, and yeah, this is exactly what we want it to look like. So right at the end of that video, I saw that this side was sticking out a little bit, and I accidentally drilled this hole to 9/16, not 5/8. So made quick work, took it to 5/8, and now it's sitting as flush as I thought it was. So we'll take off the tape, we'll throw some touch-up paint on, and then we'll start reaching up in the fender wall and getting the body washers and lock nuts on. But there she is. Alrighty, so we've got all of our holes painted. This is a reminder to go buy your actual color match paint. It obviously doesn't matter because they're never gonna see them again, and all I had was a paint pen from my truck. But you wanna get it all the metal coated so you don't have any rusting issues. But again, you're never going to see this again, so it really doesn't matter what color they are, or like how good of a job you do, or if you smear paint around, because it's all going to be covered up. But you need to go buy a touch-up pen if you don't have one, or use some spray paint, spray it in the lid, and get a Q-tip. But we didn't have any Q-tips, and this was right in the garage, so everything's nice and clean. Let it dry and then bolt it on. So when you put this on, you're gonna wanna make sure you do this clamp first, the clamp that goes to the snorkel head. This one will be accessible by the engine bay, so you don't need to worry much about that. But before you put everything together, make sure you feed the clamp on, put it on that, and then tighten it up. It comes with this foam pad that I think we mentioned earlier. It's really sticky, so if you don't get it perfect, you'll have to kind of trim it just a little bit with a razor blade, just to get it like really nice and clean on the edges so that it doesn't stick out. Otherwise, if you just let it sit in the sun, everything kind of bakes and shrinks up a little bit. So you don't necessarily need to cut it like we are, but it makes it nicer looking right away. We didn't cut our hole exactly big enough. It's off by like a fraction of an inch, so we have to squeeze this down as we feed it through, and then it's going to be really tight clearance with this, so we'll have to see if that makes any difference. Might have to tape off a little bit more and notch this top part out just a little bit. Worst case scenario, but I think that if we push it in hard enough and we push and pull, we should be able to feed it right through. But paint's dry, everything's good, so we can go ahead and get started with fitting it. This will be the most fun part. So we were having some issues because this part wasn't hitting our hole because it wasn't tall enough. So instead of cutting the new hole, Sam had the great idea of loosening this, moving it down since we have an excess of room over here, moving this clamp down here, and everything in theory should just slip right in without having to cut the hole bigger. So we'll loosen it up, flip it around, and see how it goes. So you're gonna hit a point where everything's almost in, and we look down here and she's almost there. This whole thing needs to be adjusted enough to where the bolt holes obviously fit in. And if we go look on mine real quick, we need the hose from the other side of the snorkel head to fit through the original stock hole right here, right down there, which will be nice because that clamp we can access once everything's in. It's just conforming that part to actually fit through the hole. That is very difficult. But as long as we get everything lined up right, which we're not right now, then we can just push it in the rest of the way. All right, so I got the first 3 bolts on, And if you have your template still nearby, this is nice to be able to see like where the holes go. So these 3 are pretty easy. These back 3, you have to have
Noodle arms.
little baby girl arms to get up in there and actually get them on. So, you know, I guess it pays to be a baby on those ones. But getting this clamp on, because you want to save this clamp for last. If you have to save this clamp for last. If you don't, I mean, there's really no way to do it without it. But getting that on is just time consuming. It's like little by little. But once you got this clamp on, once you have all these bolts tightened up, throw that head on and your filter back together and you're good to go. So one of the next annoying parts is getting the box lined up. It helps if you can push it enough to get a hole. Once you get the bolt in the hole and everything lined up, you only have a little bit of room with your clamp. So if you hit the spot that we're at right now, your option is to take that bolt out of the hole and realign the air box to get the clamp exposed, or keep that bolt in and try to get the clamp exposed and turned up. So right now it's just pressed in just a little bit. Obviously you can't really get to it. So some long pliers and different tools to try to just move it up just a little bit are going to be really helpful, and a light. But as long as we can get the clamp where we need it to be, we can access it with a screwdriver or a really long wrench with an extension, finish off this air box, and we should be done. But just when you think it's easy, it's something stupid. So just take your time. So we figured out our air boxes are a little bit different. His is on there. You can see there's a very slight gap from where I dremeled, and that's okay. As long as it's getting sealed, we're good. But the difference between our air boxes is pretty weird. His is like really flush and at a slight angle. And if we come over to mine, mine's like kind of elevated, up a little bit taller. You can still see on mine, maybe if it'll focus, that I still also have a little bit of a gap. But as long as everything seals up fine, everything should be okay.
We didn't continue the tightening, or?
I think it's probably tight enough. If you did want to, I would do it with a screwdriver. That's another thing, is standing up from it above on like a ladder and actually getting a flathead in there. A very long flathead is gonna be a lot easier than getting anything like an extension in there. You can really clamp it down efficiently. So yeah, we'll button it all up and throw the filters back on, throw the head on, but you can kind of see the fitment real quick. Nice and tight throughout the whole thing. Nice and tight on the bottom, top, and straight on. And you can move the whole truck with it, so it's looking good. We'll tighten up the airbox more, throw everything back together, and do a side-by-side with his and mine. Well, figuring out the airbox took longer than anything else, but now I've got everything buttoned up and plugged back in. Everything's on, super flush. Got the pad in there, but we trimmed it down a little bit on the side so it wasn't like mine. For the airbox, you should just take your time and push down really hard on it if yours doesn't just snap right in.
Wiggle it.
Yeah, wiggle it around a lot, and it'll go eventually. If your airbox looks like mine and is for some reason up a lot higher, at least seemingly, everything should go in a lot smoother. But for some reason, his airbox was a little bit different and seemingly lower. It kind of looks the same, but it goes together way differently. But he also doesn't have frame holes already drilled for his soon to be installed brackets, whereas I do. So it just kind of shows that every 4runner is different. Alrighty. And way more time later, we're done. And it works, nothing broke. All right, so we've got 2 of the eBay special snorkels all on and complete. I went back to the factory head, and I'll talk more about that later on. But you can see, especially with like my foam pad, you can see mine a little bit more from the side too, whereas with Sam's we cleaned it up just a little bit better, so it's nice and tucked. So I'm sure over time, as mine discolors and shrinks up, it'll look the same, but not bad. Alrighty. So yeah, there you guys go. For something around $200, you can get this snorkel. Fits really well. Everything's great. Lines up perfect even without the A-pillar supports. Instructions are super straightforward. Installs really easy, especially if you made sure to dot all your I's and cross all your T's on the template. Drove now with just over 2 weeks and all sorts of weather. Today was 80 degrees. Drove a while with it. A couple weeks ago, after we installed it, it got down to like the 20s at night. Drove with it. Did pretty great. So no increase in mileage yet. Still floating around 13 miles per gallon somehow. I keep going back and forth between the stock head, like the Old Faithful, and the Cyclone snorkel upgrade. I'll talk a little bit about this. So I got this with pretty high hopes. You see these on like the Humvees and stuff overseas, and they look really cool, and they have a ton of cool tech kind of built into them, and the design's really cool, how it's just like the, I don't know, weird dome, and then the actual filter part is all in the back. You've got that little turbine inside of there. Makes a really cool noise under load. It kind of sounds like a turbo. And what's cool about this filter is it is totally safe from heavy rain, snow, mud, dirt, car washes, whatever. But I was kind of disappointed in the fit on it on this snorkel. I'm sure it's great. I mean, obviously it's been around for a really long time, but for as much money as the snorkel was and it not fitting right, if you go with this, I don't know if I would go with this. The one difference, I want to say that this thing's identical to the Dobinsons and ARB snorkel. However, some of the guys that are running the Dobinsons and ARB Safari snorkels and this have no issues with this, and this does have issues. The filter they send you is a 3-inch filter, adapter, and it doesn't fit over the snorkel the way it's supposed to. So the company says, oh, just run it without the adapter, which I did. You probably see in my previous clips that it was on there, and it just sits off level. And I've tried, I've had my wife and Sam both push down on the snorkel while I tighten the clamp, and doesn't make any difference. By the time it's actually tightened up, the whole thing's crooked, and it drives me kind of crazy. So I'm gonna keep it. I paid for it. They didn't send me it or anything. The technology suite, the company was pretty responsive with all the issues, but they didn't really know why it wouldn't fit. Everything is level. Everything does make sense. It just doesn't bolt up right. But if I'll keep it in the truck, and I don't know, maybe if it's like heavy rain or heavy snow or something, I'll throw it on, run it. But for everyday driving, I think I'm just gonna keep on the stock head. I think it looks a lot cooler, and it doesn't sit crooked. It doesn't drive me insane. But for $200, I guess I kind of was hoping that it would fit perfectly. Just because it is a little different too, right? So, but yeah, there you guys go. You know, for $200, you can get the Snorkel. Baron is the guy's name on eBay, and I'll drop a link below for this piece. But super nice guy. Really helpful with everything. So go give him your money, and you know, he shipped it. I think I got it. I ordered it on a Monday and I got it on Wednesday. Shipped UPS, and Sam got his pretty quick too, and everything is included, all stainless hardware. All you really need to go buy if you don't already have the tools is Loctite and touch-up paint. But if you got blue tape, you got an angle grinder, you got a Dremel and a file, you're good to go. A couple wrenches, a couple hours, and maybe a friend to help you. Drop the liner, pull out the air box, lay the template, drill the holes, cut the hole, bolt it on, reinstall, and you're good to go. So that's it, guys. I'll drop all the links below, and if you guys got any questions or need anything, drop a comment, message me on Instagram, whatever you want.